Hey, Steve.
Hello, Joe. How are we doing?
Pretty good. We're back.
Yes.
New and improved. Well, that we're back at least.
Hopefully improved, yeah.
And welcome back, everyone, to Deliver That, the podcast for project delivery leadership. So this is part two of two episodes where the grand title, linking them all together, is Professionalism, Process and Jazz. In episode one, we talked about professionalism and process. And this time we're talking about the jazz part in particular. Of course, the two are intimately connected, so there'll be lots of references, I'm sure, to things we talked about previously, Steve. It was a really interesting conversation last time. I'm looking forward to picking up the threads this time around.
Yeah, this is a natural sort of follow-on to that previous episode, isn't it?
Exactly. So we've mentioned the idea of process and jazz, the jazz part of it, a few times over the weeks. So it makes sense to try and unpack this one a little bit. My wife is a musician, and she was particularly intrigued about why we're using the term jazz to talk about this. And of course, it's very metaphorical. We're not talking about actual jazz, of course. But what we're talking about here really is, with jazz as a metaphor, is the creativity and innovation that comes in the context of delivering projects. Jazz music itself, of course, has strict rules. It's very well defined, but has space for creativity and improvisation, taking a theme and adapting on it. And that's really what we're talking about here. And so what we've ended up doing wonderfully is adding a fourth C to the three C's that we talked about last time. And if I remember rightly, those were that the CDO brings calmness, exudes confidence or creates confidence in delivery teams, and is all about achieving consistency. And that's the essence of what professionalism is all about. And that's why we have all those processes here. So, yeah. Clearly, Steve, this is a reflection of what we talked about last time. That consistency that process gives us is the firm grounds on which we're building things from here.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Process can sort of, to a degree, it can guarantee an outcome as well. But I think you've also got to be careful. At what cost does that come? So you have an outcome, but is that the right outcome? And I think that's where you need to have this balance between the process and the jazz. You've got to be pretty careful there, because obviously process overboil is definitely a thing. Something you've got to be mindful of.
You mentioned this a couple of times in our last conversation, which was great, about how frequently process becomes so dominant, so assertive, almost aggressively so, that it can remove any sense of joy or
enjoyment.
Yeah, joy. Let's use that word, shall we? About how we go about delivering what we're doing. I mean, all of us have come to our work as experts in our field, really enjoying what we do for our work, whether that be as a designer or an engineer or user researcher or DevOps kind of things as well. There's a joy in being an expert in that field, but to have that removed by overbearing process can be really damaging.
And I think in my experience, it comes from a place of being scared to make a mistake. So people think, okay, we made a mistake once, we can't make that mistake again. Let's put another process in place to make sure that certain checks are done before that something gets released, so that we never make that mistake again. But I think you're too risk averse, or you can be too risk averse, and just keep throwing processes at problems. And all you end up with is this tick box exercise for people to go through to release something. It becomes monotonous, and people become bored when you introduce that much process, and you become almost mechanical rather than, the human beings, who've got so much more to give than just, following a process.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in our last conversation, Tom Wilmot at Human Made said that they had a phase where they had this very, expertly designed and implemented process that came into the business and a necessary part of their professionalization. But the consequence of that was that clients really loved them because the client really knew what they were getting at each point along the way. The process was so clearly laid out, as we discussed last time, really well explained to the client, which was fantastic. But yes, if the I like you pointed there to the problem of mistakes. If mistakes are badly handled, and people can feel, I guess it comes down to a lack of trust. If you don't trust that mistakes happen and that those mistakes happening are not being well handled or received, then it can be very hard to find space within it. And they at Human Made, had to find a way of recovering that sense of experimentation and necessary experimentation to get there.
Yeah, I think you need to understand what your risk appetite is. If you just throw a process at every problem that you've ever had before, you're not going to get anywhere. There's going to be no creativity. I think you need to understand what what you can't flex and what you can. And I think that there needs to be a clear distinction between the two. There's certain things, if you're working in the banking industry, there's certain rules and regulations that you've got to adhere to. So yes, you might want to have processes in place for them, but there's certain places as well where we need to just try things out occasionally. Some of those things are not going to work, some of them are, but without sort of having that sort of place to explore and try new things, you're just going to end up with the same product time and time again, which is pretty much standing still, which is the same as going backwards, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So consistency, definitely, absolutely vital. It's definitely vital as the business lives longer, as the business gets bigger, and it can be really, really important in certain sectors, as you say, that are highly regulated, and being in compliance with regulations is really important. But just as you say there, the fourth C that we're exploring here is that creativity. How do we create an environment where creativity is still at the heart of it and is really energetic as a function of the way that projects are delivered? So being systematic and being thoroughgoing is vital on the one hand. The word that I've been thinking of as we've been preparing for this is situational agility. I think that's one of the kind of the first steps on it, that there are certain situations that arise in which you want to have some agility to adapt to it. Now, agile project management, of course, has that baked in, the idea that there's an inspection at a regular point. How have we managed to what progress have we made in the last 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever the sprint cycle is? What have we done? How do we do it? Did it fit? What do we need to do next? And it has that kind of baked into it. And that situational agility seems to me the beginning of a space for creativity, being able to adapt as a team, as a whole. But I think there's more to it than just situational agility. There's also that drawing in creativity that comes from having experts in the team itself.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'd agree.
yeah, and I suppose what you're getting at there, if I'm not wrong, is that you've got a team of people. You're not the fountain of all knowledge, and I think you've got to allow certain people. Like for me, in the past, I've created like a leadership team beneath me because I can't do all the work. And I'm probably not best. Well, I'm not best placed to do much of the work, the technical work, the QA engineer, and so on. So I think you need to create, whether it's a management line beneath you, but then you also need to create that space, that environment as well for those people to operate in, and give them the trust and the boundaries in which they work. Give them a chance to explore, give them a chance. It's about sort of giving them the opportunities to learn, show what they can do. And also, I think the exec teams and the sales teams can become very blinkered. They're very focused on just selling what they've always sold, what we've always done. But what about, giving people the opportunity to kind of break it to new verticals, looking at new clients, new industries. There's so much that the technical teams can unlock, to give ideas in terms of ways that the business could perhaps grow or sort of diversify. There's
Yeah, yeah.
there's so much more that you can get from your teams. You just need to give them the time and the space and the responsibility, if you like, as well, to go out there and explore and find what else is new.
Yeah, exactly, and then bring whatever they've discovered through that exploration back into the context. What I really like then is having those experts who spot something in the environment in which you're working, where it needs something new, needs something novel to apply to it in order to crack that nut. What I have seen frequently is people who have deep knowledge in one particular thing, and it becomes the hammer that they use and throw it all around, and as a consequence, everything looks like a nail when you've got this particular hammer. This is the thing that you're going to use to hit that thing, whatever. So we're not looking at that. We're looking at people stretching out and trying new things and thinking innovatively, and drawing on progress in the technical world out there in the industry at large, and bringing those to this specific environment and trying something out.
Yeah, and as the CDO, you've got to make that happen. It's not going to happen on its own, because usually everybody's too busy with the day to day. We haven't got time, we haven't got the money to invest. So you need to be. It's your responsibility, sort of, to create I don't know. In the past, we've run things like hack days, where everybody downs tools for a day. We've got it all planned in the diary in advance, so that there's nothing launching on those days, and then you let the delivery teams loose on something entirely different. Sometimes, I would give them a topic, and they would go away. They'll get briefed at 9 o'clock. They start working either on their own or in a group at 10 o'clock. The expectation is that they come back at 4 o'clock and they present what they've built to the rest of the teams. And over time, this got the interest of some of the exec team as well. So you ended up with the exec team, some of the sales team got involved as well, because what the team were producing in perhaps 6 hours, was quite substantial, even though it was just hacked together, was stuck together with sellotape and blue tack. But actually, it was the basis of something which we could then sort of take away and spend a bit of time and money on, and actually make it into a thing, something that was either a bolt on to what we're already doing or something entirely new as well. But you've just got to make those events happen to sort of get that creativity out of the team.
It's lovely seeing when you do those demos, when you've taken the technology or engineering or whatever it is team away for a while, given them some space to work together in a different environment, to kind of self-organize around an idea with an inspirational idea. Take that back, as you say, demonstrate it to the wider team, and then to see those eyes light up. Oh, that looks brilliant. I can sell that. I can really get behind that. I can think of a client context in which that would fit really well. Is it ready? Can we take it to market?
Yeah,
well, maybe not quite yet.
Watch the sales team get all excitable, or it's a bit too excitable. Suddenly they're on the phone selling the thing when it's barely been sort of glued together that day. But yeah, it is, and it's an outlet for the team's creativity, but it's also a chance for you get the sales team chatting to the delivery team as well. The kinds of things they might like to sell, or the clients are asking for, and you start having a bit of interaction there as well. So when you have more of these hack days, we've got something else to perhaps we've got a different topic that we could be working on the next time as well. And it's a good sort of way to kind of cross-pollinate across those teams.
Yeah. I really like the notion of creating space for creativity within project teams. I've seen it happen really close up. One of the best technical architects I worked with was someone who's exactly like this. We were working on a project right at the vanguard of usage of LLMs in AI tools. The client we were working there was in one of those regulated industries, so we had a really strict boundary on what we could and couldn't say in customer responses because of that being so strictly regulated. And she said, well, what we obviously need in here is something called retrieval augmented generation, RAG for short, which is where you say to the LLM, there's a limited amount of content you can talk about. Here is that content in vectorized form. Only extract your answer from this set. And then that answer can be given out. She created, not only the concept of it, and we were able to describe that to the client, but then architected microservices to extract the data, store the data, and retrieve the data. It was really, really well designed, and I really loved how she'd brought her previous experiences and her reading in the industry at large to that particular use case with that specific client. The consequence of that was we did it for one client in that creative way. It was absolutely brilliant application of it. But the consequence was that we were able to then say, well, this is a feature that should be in the core product as well, and then got extended. And that's precisely, I think, what we're talking about here as the jazz dimension. It was a very orthodox client project. We had that strong systematic foundation, all the thoroughgoing processes. The client felt really safe the whole way through, really understood what we were doing. And that enabled someone, this technical architect, this brilliant expert, to be the jazz musician, as it were, in this thinly stretched metaphor, to bring in those skills and create a very specific, smart application for this, which had wider use. And it was exactly a great example. So what we're talking about here is this connection between thoroughgoing process and improvisation, and how those two are must be intimately interconnected. What's interesting, I suppose, if we refer back to what we talked about in the previous episode about process overboil and the consequence of killing or drowning, at least, that space for creativity. You mentioned there, Steve, the hack days and how that can create this wider improvisation. But if there isn't space for those hack days or equivalent, isn't space for that, one of the things that I've seen is the liability for flight risk. If you have experts like that brilliant technical architect I was just describing, and don't create an environment in which they can bring those capabilities to the table, then there's the chance of boredom or frustration if she was to take those ideas to those higher up the food chain, as it were, to the CTO or to others, and they throw cold water over it or say, great idea, but we've already got a roadmap and we're working to that roadmap and it'll have to fit further down the line or whatever. Then there is that flight risk that you have brilliant people that you're liable to lose because they're frustrated.
I mean, tech people are naturally inquisitive, and if you don't give them that freedom to go and be inquisitive, to go and explore, they're just going to go off there and find it themselves. So that's your flight risk there, isn't it?
I think that's especially a big problem if the business itself is a knowledge business, if it's based on the quality of the experts you have in the team, and if the overbearing process that the CDO has put in place is so strong, so dominant, then you're risking the business as a whole. And as we said in previous episodes, one of the responsibilities of the CDO is to the health of the business.
I mean, you can just look at individuals within the team that you're in now. Could you afford to lose that person? What would be the cost to replace them as well? And you've got some people who have been there for years. What domain knowledge and experience would they take with them? Is that a gap that you think you could fill? And I think it's far easier and it's far better generally all around for everyone if you've got somebody who's a good, solid worker, to nurture them, to give them opportunities to develop, rather than bringing in somebody new, somebody who is an unknown. It's great to bring in sort of flesh blood every now and again. You need that. But at the same time, if you are an employer that looks after your staff, people are naturally going to become a lot more loyal to you, and, you get the teams working together, you get the teams sharing together, that sort of supporting each other's development as well. It's a far healthier environment rather than just keep replacing people time after time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so of course you don't want to be, put golden handcuffs around someone you can never leave you want to be a launch pad to empower people, but at the same time, if it you don't want to be the cause of flight because it's boring or controlling or whatever. I wonder whether that's actually a good place to put a pin in things and pause for a moment. And then when we come back, we're going to look at the flip side of jazz in relation to projects, in particular about the trouble with jazz artists. So, back shortly. Welcome back. Right. So in this second half, we are going to talk about one of the consequences or maybe the risks to be aware of with creating an environment which supports creativity or is conducive to good improvisation and situational agility. That was the phrase from last time, wasn't it? Which is there is a problem with or the risk of jazz artists. It's very easy in that environment, I think, to feel because in jazz you get a chance to fly solo or be solo, to be the reason why again we're pushing the metaphor a little bit too hard here maybe, but to
keep pushing.
Yeah, to have the quartet focused around one particular personality. And that means that there's then the potential for some problematic character traits to come out. And what I'm thinking about here in particular is those who thrive in a lack of structure. I'm aware, Steve, that as we're talking about this is probably a bit of therapy for both of us, where we've experienced this in previous phases of our career. So no names being named or anything like that.
Anonymized.
Nonetheless, there is that dimension to which we've both been witness, where some people really, really thrive in chaotic environments, which breeds some oddities. Certainly, and the thing that we brought up in the previous episode about calmness is vital. You need to be the calm heart often when other people might be flapping or struggling. But and to use another metaphor, if you see yourself as the center of a storm, like a hurricane, that calm center, what is happening around you is this kind of maelstrom, and we don't want that. That's just as problematic.
Yeah, and I think if you're that kind of person, then you don't see it. You know, if you're the one sort of going in there thinking, right, okay, don't worry, I've got this. Everything's going to, I'm the funnel through which everything is going to go. You want to be across every detail. And what you don't see is that actually you're micromanaging. You're not letting the leaders in your team lead. You're stifling any creativity. It becomes quite claustrophobic as well. And you don't feel like you can move. Someone might give you a responsibility. Okay, you're going to be responsible for X. You're going to go over there and you're going to do X. But then that CDO goes with you as well. And the CDO will also go with the other leader that goes off with the responsibility to do something else. So you never feel, if you're that like next level of management down, you never feel like you've actually got the responsibility, the freedom to actually go off and do what you do best, because you've always got that person kind of micromanaging you.
Yeah, exactly. So this is definitely a note to self to be aware of these personality traits. There can be an addiction to chaos or an addiction to control and knowledge, and that seeing yourself as the one who brings order to chaos. And it can be an essential trait which someone needs in this kind of position as a delivery principal, to bring order out of chaos. But if you need chaos in order to bring order, and then become the person who perpetuates chaos, keeps creating chaos in order to bring order to it, to be seen as the one who is the vanquisher of Thor in the storm god. So here we are, massaging the storm imagery again. If you see yourself as Thor bringing order to the storm, or commanding the storm to bend to you, And I think there's ways in which you can see that happening, whether we're doing it ourselves, or I know I've certainly seen that in the past, whether you see people who are constantly wanting to adapt on the fly in the middle of something, wanting to flex well-established practices to suit business needs, or the needs of your own business, or the client's needs, but it's constantly doing that, and is thereby just creating, processes never become processes, or things never become
Yeah.
processes. They become something that's recreated or reimagined every single
Yeah.
time without consistency.
You want your CDO to lead from the front. That's absolutely where they need to be. And there should be at this like elevated position. They don't want to be down in the weeds, because the view you get from there, you're not seeing the whole picture. But you've got your generals within the team that you should be sort of assigning responsibilities to, and let them go out there and do their job and then report back to you. You shouldn't be on top of people all of the time. You've got to, there will be processes and controls in place to make sure that when the people go off in the smaller teams to do a piece of work, they know they've got processes for certain things that they're going to follow. You've also given them space and freedom for a bit of creativity, and that's a real healthy mix. And then they kind of report back and sort of feed into the bigger picture view that you've got, rather than you trying to sort of command and lead every activity.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things which I'm quite conscious of is how these kind of people who thrive in chaos, or who have a hunger almost for chaos, the company growth can be problematic both for them and for the company. That they themselves can bristle when the company grows, because it becomes more things than they can get involved with, and they find themselves being spread too thin. So they might bristle as the company grows. But also, if they are responding by saying, there's too much going on, we can't do this, we can't do that, there's too, those processes never become separate from themselves because they have to be involved in anything, then company itself can't grow, and will probably hit some sort of ceiling
Yeah.
of some kind. So chaos addicts, thunder gods, or jazz artists, to go back to our original allegory, jazz artists who see themselves as solo artists in effect, can be problematic in the context
Yeah.
of or for company growth.
And similarly, you've also got the up and coming jazz artists as well. People sometimes talk about the rock stars within the team. And they put somebody on a parapet, and this person is amazing, this person can do no wrong. And I think sometimes you're creating mini or miniature sort of jazz artists within the team as well, which can also stifle creativity, because they're always right, they're not listening in the team, and they create it spoils the mix, I think, sometimes, of a team. You need different people, different personalities within a team, but sometimes if you've got somebody who just stands out there too much, just really doesn't listen to the team because they've been told how great they are every day, I think you're also potentially creating those new chaos artists, or chaos
Yeah,
monkeys
yeah,
for the years to come as well.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you end up with a bunch of divas in the team, to milk another musical analogy. But too many divas, too many people craving attention, or needing to have their expertise serviced, or an environment created where they can do their thing, is just as problematic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say overall is that the free for all is just not okay. An environment where you innovate all the time, constantly changing and adapting, is just as problematic as the process overboil we talked about in the previous episode. And what we're aiming for then is that really healthy back and forward dynamic interaction between process and adaptation, being systematic and being innovative, working in really healthy symbiosis with each other. That you have space for experts to do their expert thing, to learn and be brilliant artists, as it were, in their own right, but that artistry is always at the service of the larger theme, which is the outcomes for the clients. And I suppose partly that reflects back to something which I've heard you talk about previously about playing people in their right positions. Maybe we're moving to a sporting analogy, but certainly in musical context, when you're creating a jazz quartet or whatever, you want to have the right mix of musicians who work with each other in a really healthy way, and how you get the best out of people.
Yeah, the most common occurrence I see within teams, within any organization really, is on the technical side. If you've got somebody who's a developer, they become a senior developer, and then the next step is they become a lead developer, and it's all of a sudden they're leading people. And that's not always the right direction to take a technical person in. You've got somebody who's very good technically, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a good people leader. And you're doing a disservice to the team by automatically placing them into a people leadership role. This is where you need to be having relationships within the team as well, and understanding the path that somebody wants their career to take. Some people are interested in leading people, providing them with coaching and mentoring and helping other people become better versions of themselves. And then you've got the other tech people who they go from senior developer to just another senior. They might perhaps the most natural next step for them is to become like a technical architect or a solutions architect or something. When you start playing people out of position, you're not going to get the best out of your team. Those people they're not necessarily motivated to manage people, or perhaps they're not necessarily motivated to become an architect or something. This is why I think you need that relationship within your team. You need the openness and put people into those correct positions and get the most out of the team. You've got things like secondments. You can sort of let people try a different area and see if that works for them. You might get more out of them that way, but certainly don't just assume that somebody goes from that position into that position. It generally just doesn't work.
Yeah, micro story from my wider family. A member of the family who was an absolutely brilliant engineer, a mechanical engineer, really superb, PhD in it, researcher. His company, as he matured through it, his company assumed that the right thing was to put him into people management, and he was not a people manager. He's a boffin, but it had really, really negative consequences because he found that people management created so much more stress for him that he couldn't function, and so they had to back out of that and find him a way for him to carry on being an expert. I've seen that in so many other positions, that the presumption is that promotion means people management. But it's just not. It's rarely right. There's a very certain set of characteristics where
we talked before as well. Didn't we? I think we touched on stifled creativity. In terms of the earlier topics, and this is another way to stifle creativity. You've got somebody who's not spending all their time doing what they love doing, and it's it's the wrong path to go down.
Yeah. So I think that's a good place to bring this to a conclusion. We've had a really interesting two-part conversation on professionalism, process, and jazz. And I love that we've found ourselves 4 C's in the round, which are things that we're working towards: calmness, confidence, and consistency in terms of professionalism and process. And especially that we want to add this dimension of jazz, which is about creativity, calmness, confidence, consistency, and creativity, whilst guarding against a 5th C, chaos, and the consequence of having chaos addicts in a project environment as a delivery principle, especially. That's of course our focus, but not just as the CDO or a delivery principle, but in other parts of delivery teams, how problematic it can be to have rock stars and divas.
Yeah. It's worth mentioning as well that Status Quo made a living out of 3 chords, apparently. And then I went to see them years ago, and the name of the tour was In Search of the Fourth Chord. And I feel like that's be the 4th C. So that's the level that we're at now. I'll let you decide who's Francis.
Yeah, absolutely. Did they play jazz? I can't remember. No, I don't think that was
jazz.
Thing.
No.
Steve, what a brilliant conversation. I've really enjoyed that. It's been great to take a bit more time as well to dive into it and really draw out the full breadth of this topic. Really interesting topic.
I would also say as well, if anyone's listening and they've got anything in particular that they'd like us to sort of explore a bit further, go into a little bit deeper, would like to sort of hear other people speak about as well, it would be great to get people's feedback.
Absolutely, and you can do that by going to deliverthatpodcast.com, where you'll find out more about the podcast, all the previous episodes, and there's a form there you can fill in if you want to make contact with us, or you can probably find us online somewhere. So, many thanks. Episode 5, done.
Nice one. Cheers, and Joe.
Cheers, Steve.
Everybody else.
See you next time.
Thanks for now.
Bye.